19 seconds. A racist officer violently pins a young black boy against a patrol car, convinced there will be no consequences. Bystanders film everything as the child cries out and the officer grows cold and dismissive. But there's one detail he never bothers to ask: who the boy's mother is. Within hours, the footage reaches the wrong people for him, and the truth about her job triggers a response he never saw coming. Part 1. Laurel and 9th. The asphalt of the intersection had been baking under the August sun for hours. When Officer Craig Bellamy shoved Malik Devereaux against the hood of his cruiser, heat punched through the boy's thin gray t-shirt and burned the skin beneath his shoulder blade. His cheek struck the rear window glass. For a moment, he could see his own reflection there. Wide brown eyes, a scraped knuckle, tears he hadn't realized were already falling. "Please," he gasped, "you're hurting my arm." Bellamy tightened his grip on Malik's wrist. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." He was 13 years old. He weighed 102 pounds. The only thing in his hand had been a white paper bag from the corner pharmacy, a green logo stamped across the front. One corner had crumpled under Bellamy's palm. Inside, a bottle of children's ibuprofen knocked against a second bottle, a prescription belonging to his mother. Around them, the intersection of Laurel Avenue and 9th Street seemed to hold its breath. A delivery driver stopped beside his open van door. Two women outside a coffee shop turned toward the sound. A teenager on a skateboard planted one foot on the curb and lifted his phone. "He's a kid," someone shouted. "Everybody stay back," Bellamy called without turning. "Lawful pedestrian stop." The skateboarder started recording. 40 seconds earlier, Malik had been thinking about nothing more urgent than whether his little sister would still be awake when he got home. It was a Tuesday in late August, and Millbrook Heights sat under the kind of thick, wet heat that made the sidewalks shimmer. His mother had texted him at 3:40 to say her prescription was ready. The pharmacy sat 5 blocks from their duplex on Ash Grove Lane, a walk Malik had made alone a dozen times that summer. At 4:12, he reached the crossing at Laurel and 9th. The white walking figure was already lit. The countdown showed 19 seconds. He stepped off the curb. Bellamy's cruiser rounded the corner too fast, front tires crossing the stop line and stopping half inside the crosswalk. He hit the horn with the heel of his hand. Malik jumped, nearly dropping the pharmacy bag, but the signal still showed 12 seconds. He walked around the nose of the car and kept moving toward the far curb. "Hey," Bellamy shouted through his open window. "You trying to get yourself killed?" Malik stopped. His heart was pounding from the horn, but he glanced at the signal, then back at the officer. "I had the walk light." It wasn't defiance. It was the plain answer of a careful kid who'd been taught to look both ways, obey the signal, and speak clearly when an adult asked a question. Bellamy heard something else entirely. He shoved the transmission into park and got out. 36, broad through the chest, already irritated from a shift that had started with a supervisor's note about a sloppy report. Sweat darkened the fabric under his vest. He stepped into the crosswalk as though Malik had summoned him there personally. "What'd you say to me?" "The walk signal was on. Hands where I can see them." Malik lifted the pharmacy bag a little higher. His other hand hung open at his side. "They are. I'm just going home." "Turn around. Face the vehicle." "Why?" The question changed Bellamy's expression. The irritation hardened into something closer to certainty, the kind Bellamy had learned over 11 years could substitute for having an actual reason. Give a command fast enough, and most people obeyed before thinking to ask whether he had the right to give it. "Because I told you to. Put the bag down and turn around." Malik glanced toward the coffee shop, maybe looking for an adult who could explain what was happening. That was when Bellamy grabbed his wrist. Part 2. The bystanders. The pull spun Malik half around. The pharmacy bag crushed between them, and one of the bottles slipped through the torn paper and rolled beneath the cruiser. Malik cried out. Bellamy drove his shoulder against the rear door, forearm across his back, forcing him down. "Stop fighting me." I'm not. I didn't do anything. His knees buckled. His palm hit the hot glass as he tried to keep his face from following. The first to move closer was Dolores Kim, 51, a physical therapist who'd stepped out of the coffee shop with an iced tea in hand. She set it on a newspaper box and held both palms visible. Officer, he isn't resisting. I watched the whole thing. He had the walk signal. Back up. He's crying. Let go of his arm. Back up now, or you'll be detained too. Dolores stopped, but didn't leave. Beside her, the skateboarder, 16-year-old Owen Prater, whose after-school job at an auto parts counter had taught him to read names and numbers off things quickly, moved to the curb and turned his phone horizontal. Officer Craig Bellamy, he said for the recording. Millbrook Heights PD, badge 401, 4:13 p.m., Laurel and 9th. Bellamy turned his head. His forearm didn't ease off Malik's back. Put that away. I'm on a public sidewalk. You're interfering with an investigation. What investigation? More phones appeared. A man in the stop delivery van filmed through his windshield. A barista came out from behind the counter. Someone waiting at the red light angled a camera through her passenger window. Each new lens made Bellamy more aware he was being watched, and instead of calming him, the attention made him perform authority louder. Subject entered traffic without regard for a police vehicle, he announced, refused multiple lawful commands, became physically resistant. That's not true, Malik sobbed. The light said I could walk. Quiet. My mom's going to know. Bellamy let out a short, humorless laugh. I'm sure your mom thinks you never do anything wrong. She'll know what to do. Everybody says that when they get caught. The prescription bottle rolled into view from under the car. Dolores saw the label before Bellamy did. Renee Devereaux, she read aloud. Officer, those are her mother's medications. You need to get them out of the street. Bellamy glanced down, then back at Malik. The name meant nothing to him. He'd never met Renee Devereaux. He didn't know her face. He didn't know that 4 years earlier she had stood in a federal courtroom and helped convict 2 state troopers for beating a handcuffed man. He didn't know her entire career had been built around exactly the kind of details officers like him assumed no one preserved. She can pick them up when I'm done, he said. Done with what? Dolores demanded. He ignored her, asking Malik for his name, address, and date of birth. Malik answered through tears. When he stumbled slightly on the day of the month, Bellamy accused him of giving false information. Malik repeated it, slower. Bellamy radioed dispatch, describing him as a combative juvenile who had created a traffic hazard. Dispatch asked if medical assistance was needed. Negative, Bellamy said. Dolores's voice rose behind him. He said his shoulder hurts. No medical assistance, Bellamy repeated. The walk signal cycled twice more while he held Malik against the car. Cars waited through a green light because the cruiser blocked the intersection. Sweat ran into Malik's eye. The door scorched his skin through his shirt. At last, the radio confirmed no warrants associated with his name. Bellamy released his wrist, but not before pressing it once more against the door, a final reminder of who controlled the moment. Malik staggered back, clutching his arm to his chest. Pick up your stuff, Bellamy said. Go home and learn how to act when an officer talks to you. Dolores stepped forward. You owe that child an ambulance and an apology. This contact is over. Clear the area. Owen's phone had captured all of it. The label on the bottle, the countdown on the signal, the red mark already forming around Malik's wrist. Part 3. The Call. Owen posted a 71-second clip before Malik reached Ashgrove Lane. His caption read, Millbrook Heights cop pins 13-year-old to a hot patrol car after HE blocks the crosswalk. His older sister shared it first. Then a teacher recognized Malik from Millbrook Middle. By 4:30, it had reached a neighborhood safety group. By 4:50, someone had posted Dolores's longer video from a second angle. At 5:02, Malik turned the key to his house and stepped inside. Renee Devereaux was at the kitchen table, working remotely on a sentencing memo. She heard the door close, then the ragged sound of a child trying not to cry loudly. "Baby." She was on her knees before he reached the hallway. Malik held up the torn pharmacy bag like proof of a failure. "I lost one of the pills. I'm sorry." "Forget the medicine. Look at me." One side of his face was red. His left shoulder sat lower than his right. Finger-shaped bruises darkened around his wrist. Renee's first feeling was terror. Rage arrived right behind it, hot and immediate, but 9 years of training held both out of her voice. She didn't ask, "What did the officer do to you?" She didn't ask leading questions that could reshape a frightened child's memory. She put both hands flat on the floor where he could see them. "You're safe now," she said. "Take your time and tell me what happened, from the beginning." The story came in fragments: the pharmacy, the walk signal, the horn, the command to show his hands, the sudden grip, the heat of the door, a man telling him he was resisting when he could barely move. "Did you ever pull away from him?" "I tried to keep my face off the glass." "Did you touch him?" "No." "Did he say you were under arrest?" "No." "Did he say why he was holding you?" Malik shook his head. "He just kept saying I had to listen." Renee breathed slowly and counted to 5. She was 43, an assistant United States attorney in the Northern District, and for 9 years she had prosecuted civil rights violations committed under color of law. She knew what unnecessary force looked like. She knew what a false official narrative sounded like while it was being assembled. Most of all, she knew that being right was not the same as being ready to prove it. Her phone began vibrating on the table, again and again. She helped Malik to the couch, brought him water, wrapped ice in a dish towel. Only once his breathing slowed did she look at the screen. 17 missed calls. A new message from an unfamiliar number. "Is this your son?" with a link beneath it. She watched the video twice, low volume. On the third viewing, she stopped being only Malik's mother and started thinking like a lawyer, hating herself a little for needing to make that switch. The clip had an upload timestamp, but not necessarily an original recording time. The platform could compress the file, strip metadata. Other footage might exist and vanish. The cruiser's dash camera would show the signal. Bellamy's body camera might have caught words spoken before the first bystander started filming. Dispatch logs would establish what justification he'd given and when. She photographed Malik's face, shoulder, and wrist. She placed the torn bag and both bottles in a clean paper sack without wiping them down. She wrote down the exact time he'd walked in the door. Then she called the pediatrician's office. "Are you calling the police?" Malik asked. "I'm calling people whose job is to make sure the police don't get to investigate themselves." "Are you going to arrest him?" "No, I can't, and I won't be the prosecutor on this case. You're my son. That means another office has to decide." "Then what can you do?" She took his hand carefully, avoiding the bruise. "I can make sure the truth doesn't disappear." Part 4. The screen. At 5:15, Renee called her supervisor, U.S. Attorney Patricia Alvarez. "My son was subjected to force by a Millbrook Heights officer less than an hour ago," she said, careful, starting with the conflict before the facts. "Video is already circulating. I'm reporting this as a parent, not requesting a particular charging decision. I need to be screened from any resulting investigation." "Is Malik safe?" "Conscious. Shoulder and wrist are injured. I'm taking him to urgent care now." "Do that first. I'll contact the Civil Rights Division and the FBI field office. Do not call anyone at Millbrook Heights PD yourself." "I wasn't planning to." "I know. I had to say it." Renee understood. Every choice she made would eventually be scrutinized by defense attorneys, reporters, possibly a jury. If she leveraged her position, Bellamy's lawyers would call it political retaliation. If she did nothing, evidence might vanish. The lawful path between those two risks was narrow. but it existed. Alvarez placed an immediate ethical screen around Renee. No one in her civil rights unit could discuss the case with her. Decisions would run through prosecutors from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division in Washington, assisted by agents with no prior history working alongside her. Renee would be treated as a reporting parent and witness, nothing more. At urgent care, Dr. Alicia Ferrer documented swelling in Malik's left wrist, bruising along the shoulder, and a mild abrasion near his cheekbone. X-rays showed no fracture. The relief that brought Renee did not erase what had happened. Pain might get worse overnight, Dr. Ferrer told Malik. You might feel jumpy, have trouble sleeping. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means your body remembers being scared. Malik nodded. Can I still go to my scrimmage Saturday? Let's let the shoulder rest this weekend. We'll decide then. The question nearly broke Renee. Her son was measuring an assault against a basketball scrimmage because 13-year-old life was supposed to be made of that, not evidence logs and federal interviews. Part 5. The Preservation Request. Across town, Millbrook Heights Police Chief Donald Ferris watched the evening broadcast from a conference room. Bellamy sat at the far end of the table beside his union representative, Sergeant Roy Chalmers. The public information officer had already drafted a statement calling the clip an edited social media video and announcing an internal review. Edited? Ferris asked. Do we know that? Bellamy leaned forward. Kid stepped in front of my unit. I got out to identify her. Him. He refused commands, got combative. I used control pressure. No strikes, no cuffs, no injury. Was your body camera on? Should have activated when I opened the door. Have you reviewed it? No. Ferris looked to his internal affairs lieutenant. Secure the camera, secure the vehicle. Nobody exports, clips, or annotates anything until counsel gives us a protocol. Bellamy's jaw tightened. This is becoming a circus because of who his mother is. Who's his mother? Chalmers turned his phone around. Renee Devereaux's professional biography, pulled from the Department of Justice website. Assistant United States Attorney, he said. Civil rights prosecutions. For the first time since the encounter, certainty left Bellamy's face. That doesn't change what happened. No, Ferris said. The video's going to decide what happened. The preservation request reached headquarters at 5:40. Body camera file and audit history, dash camera footage, vehicle location data, dispatch audio, mobile terminal messages, radio transmissions, use of force reports, personnel records on prior force complaints, and every policy governing juvenile contacts. Separate notices went to the pharmacy, the coffee shop, and 3 businesses facing the intersection. At 6 o'clock, FBI Special Agent Talia Rourke called Owen Prater. His mother listened on speakerphone as Rourke explained she needed the original file, not a version pulled from social media. Owen agreed to preserve his phone and export the footage uncut. Dolores Kim received a similar call, as did the delivery driver and the woman who'd filmed from her car. At 6:20, Millbrook Heights PD announced Bellamy had been placed on administrative leave, describing the incident as an evolving internal personnel matter and asking the public not to rush to judgment. At 6:35, Dolores's full video reached a local station, 3 minutes, 40 seconds, uncut. It showed the white walking figure illuminated as Malik stepped off the curb. It showed Bellamy's cruiser crossing the stop line into the crosswalk. It captured Dolores telling him Malik had the signal. It captured his refusal of medical attention after a complaint of pain. Most damning of all, it showed Malik's hands visible before the first command was ever given. By 8 o'clock, the first version of Bellamy's incident report appeared in the internal system. He wrote that an unidentified juvenile had suddenly entered the path of a marked patrol vehicle, concealed his hands near an unknown bag, and attempted to pull away while refusing repeated commands. He noted he'd used minimal guiding contact and observed no complaint of pain or visible injury. The report had a problem beyond its contradictions. Bellamy wrote it after he already knew multiple videos existed. Chalmers called him at 8:15.
Don't submit anything else. You need counsel. It's accurate. Then let counsel review the evidence before you create more of it. I know what I saw. That's not what worries me. Part 6. What the numbers showed. The next morning brought a sky the color of dull steel. By 9 o'clock, more than 200 people stood outside police headquarters. Some carried signs with Malik's name. Others carried names of people whose complaints against the department had never been sustained. At 10 o'clock, Agent Rourke arrived at the Devereaux home with Dr. Priya Bhatt, a forensic interviewer trained to speak with children after traumatic events. The interview took place at a child advocacy center, not a police station. Renee watched through one-way glass. Malik's account remained consistent: the walking figure, the countdown, the hand around his wrist, the bottle rolling under the car, trying to keep his face off the hot glass. "What did you think would happen?" Dr. Bhatt asked. Malik looked at his hands. "I thought if I moved, he'd hurt me more. But when I didn't move, he kept saying I was fighting. I didn't know what he wanted." At headquarters, technicians copied Bellamy's body camera file, preserving its hash value and audit trail. The footage began at 4:12:41, when Bellamy opened his door. Malik was already inside the crosswalk, under an active signal. The audio caught Bellamy mutter, "Not today," before confronting him. It caught every command and response. Malik never threatened him, never concealed his hands, never tried to flee. When he asked why he had to face the vehicle, Bellamy said, low enough the bystander footage hadn't caught it clearly, "Kids like you learn the hard way." That history began arriving in boxes. Bellamy had been with Millbrook Heights for 11 years. Citizens had filed 13 complaints naming him. 8 involved black residents, 4 alleged unnecessary force. Only 1 had ever been sustained, for failing to activate his body camera during a traffic stop. The discipline, a written warning. 2 years earlier, Bellamy had stopped 16-year-old Xavier Combs outside a convenience store, claiming he matched a burglary suspect and reached toward his waistband. Xavier said he'd been pulling out his school ID. Bellamy twisted his arm hard enough to dislocate his shoulder. No burglary had occurred in that neighborhood. The suspect description in the report described an adult in a red jacket. Xavier was a teenager in a gray school uniform. The department cleared Bellamy after a 12-day review. The city later paid Xavier's family $165,000 with a confidentiality clause that couldn't lawfully prevent cooperation with investigators. Local reporter Simone Faucher had covered that settlement vote. She called Renee on Friday afternoon. "I'm not asking for inside information. I want you to know this officer's been here before." "I can't discuss the case," Renee said, "but please preserve whatever you have in its original form." "There are other families," Faucher said. "I think the city made each one believe they were alone." She was right. By Saturday, Agent Rourke's team had identified 5 prior complainants willing to talk. The pattern wasn't identical in each case, but it shared a sequence. Bellamy opened with minor or undefined suspicion. When questioned, he treated the question as resistance. He escalated commands until obedience became physically difficult. Then he described the confusion he'd created as evidence of danger. Data analyst Devin Okafor spent 2 days cleaning duplicate records and comparing Bellamy's stop rates to peers on the same shifts. Black residents made up 35% of the population in his usual patrol zone. They accounted for nearly 70% of his discretionary stops. His consent search rate ran more than double his peers, yet found contraband less often, not more. He also used phrases like "appeared nervous" and "furtive movement" far more frequently than colleagues working identical beats. Devin found something else. In 9 reports involving force or a contested search, Bellamy had copied entire sentences from earlier reports verbatim, including an identical misplaced comma. "He isn't documenting what he observes," Devin told Rourke. "He's selecting language that's already survived review." Sergeant Chalmers' name appeared on the approval line of every one of those reports. Part 7. The 4th video. On Monday, Millbrook Heights leaders held a news conference. Mayor Constance Whitfield stood beside Chief Ferris. When a reporter asked why Bellamy remained on street duty after 13 complaints and a costly settlement, Ferris said personnel law prevented discussion of prior allegations. "Were you aware of those allegations?" Fauché asked from the second row. "The department reviews every complaint under established policy." "That wasn't the question." Ferris ended the conference 4 minutes later. That evening, a fourth video surfaced. Someone who'd been parked across the street, unaware her phone had kept recording after Malik walked away. It showed Bellamy standing beside his cruiser, talking on his personal phone. "Kid pulled the mom card," he said, laughing. "Whole crowd acted like I was arresting the governor. He'll be fine. They always are once the camera comes out." The clip turned public anger cold. It showed not a man shaken by a difficult encounter, but one certain a child's pain would carry no consequence. It also established he'd used his personal phone immediately afterward, which led investigators to a limited warrant for communications relevant to the incident and report. A message from Bellamy to Chalmers, sent at 4:28, got a loud juvenile stop about to hit socials. No cuffs, minimal contact, needed classified pedestrian assist. Chalmers' reply 4 minutes later. "Write the commands first. Mention hands and traffic. Don't watch clips until reports in." Bellamy hadn't followed that last instruction. His browsing history showed he'd opened Owen's video at 5:58, over an hour before submitting his report. The line claiming he'd observed no complaint of pain was written after he'd watched Malik say, on his own phone, "You're hurting my arm." The investigation was no longer only about a split-second judgment. It was about what Bellamy had done after he'd had time to think. Part 8. The Missing Pages. Federal prosecutor Elias Warwick was assigned from the Civil Rights Division to lead the case. He met Renee once in a neutral conference room and asked that all further communication go through the victim witness coordinator. "I need you to understand the difference between public outrage and admissible proof," he said. "I know that professionally. I need to hear it as a parent right now."
Section 242 requires proof he willfully deprived Malik of a constitutional right while acting under color of law. Bad judgment isn't enough. Negligence isn't enough. What do you have? I can't brief you on grand jury material. I can tell you the investigation is active, substantial, and independent of your office. Then why are we meeting? Because Malik may have to testify one day. I want him to have support without anyone promising an outcome. I've promised him none. Good, Renee said. Keep doing that. Meanwhile, Captain Marisol Gutierrez, who had supervised internal affairs 4 years earlier before being transferred to administrative services for repeatedly objecting to how findings got softened, contacted Rourke through counsel. She brought no stolen files, only dates, case numbers, and an account of how the system worked. A proposed finding would move through a review meeting attended by command staff and a city labor attorney. Words changed. Not justified became policy unclear. Inconsistent statement became insufficient evidence. She'd originally recommended Bellamy's force in the Xavier Combs case be found unnecessary. The final determination read, "Not sustained." Her 12-page analysis had vanished from the file sent to the Civilian Review Board. The document system's archive function, which command staff seemed to have forgotten existed, showed Gutierrez uploading a 26-page report on a Monday morning. By that afternoon, Chalmers had downloaded it. The next day, a 23-page version replaced it under the same case number. The missing pages contained her force analysis and a recommendation for discipline. Part 9. What he watched before he wrote. On Wednesday, Chalmers sat for an interview with counsel present. He called standard movement language a reference to accurate professional terminology. "Did you remove Captain Gutierrez's analysis?" "No." Did you know it had been removed? Not at the time. What did you mean by, "I'll fix the rest"? Grammar and formatting. 3 pages of grammar and formatting had disappeared. Bellamy declined to be interviewed. His right, which investigators did not treat as evidence of guilt. His own recorded words and written report remained, though, and the report was becoming impossible to reconcile with the footage. The traffic department's signal record showed the pedestrian phase at Laurel and Ninth had 17 seconds remaining when Malik entered the crosswalk. Bellamy's cruiser crossed the stop line 3 seconds later, without lights or siren. He hadn't been responding to any call. The pharmacy's receipt, time-stamped 4:09, proved Malik had left only minutes earlier. Its exterior camera showed him walking calmly with the bag in hand. The coffee shop's camera captured the entire crossing from above. There was no possibility he'd leaped into traffic or hidden his hands. Every independent clock told the same story. Bellamy's report told another. Part 10. Indictment. 1 week after the encounter, the city placed Bellamy on unpaid suspension and ordered him to surrender his badge, weapon, and credentials. A news camera caught him watching from behind a curtain as 2 officers carried the locked weapons case to their car. Chalmers was reassigned and his database access restricted. Bellamy's attorney, Preston Hale, held a news conference. Officer Bellamy made a split-second decision in a dangerous traffic environment. A short clip cannot convey the totality of what an experienced officer perceived. The statement reached Malik during a therapy session. "What's totality mean?" "The whole situation," Renee explained. "The whole video is longer than his report." "Yes. And I'm still 13 in the whole situation." "Yes, you are." 2 weeks after Laurel and Ninth, a federal grand jury returned a 3-count indictment against Craig Bellamy. Willful deprivation of Malik's right to be free from unreasonable seizure. Willful use of unreasonable force resulting in bodily injury. And obstruction for a materially false report intended to influence a foreseeable federal investigation. State prosecutors filed separate charges of second-degree assault and misconduct in office. Bellamy surrendered without incident at sunrise. He wore a gray suit to his initial appearance and was released pending trial under strict conditions. No contact with Malik, Renee, or any witness. Surrender of personal firearms. No law enforcement duties. Outside the courthouse, Renee stepped to the microphones with Malik beside her, holding her hand. "We're grateful to the witnesses who chose not to look away," she said. "We're grateful to the investigators who followed the evidence. An indictment is not a verdict, and we respect the process ahead. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. No child's safety should depend on his parent's profession, and no officer should believe a badge places him beyond the law." She took no questions. Part 11. The trial. 7 months later, jury selection began in federal court. Malik was 14 now, half an inch taller, hair cut shorter. Elias Warwick met with him twice before testimony. "If you don't remember something, say so. If a question confuses you, say that too. Your job isn't to win an argument, it's to answer honestly." The government's opening statement began with the walk signal. "This case started with 17 seconds of permission," Warwick told the jury. Officer Bellamy turned his own mistake in that crosswalk into a confrontation, and then turned a child's fear into a justification. When the evidence contradicted him, he wrote a report designed to contradict the evidence. Defense attorney Preston Hale urged the jury not to judge a fast-moving street encounter from the comfort of a courtroom. Officer Bellamy used a brief control hold, released the juvenile, made no arrest. The government has converted imperfect policing into a federal crime because a video became politically explosive. Witnesses established the physical facts one by one. The signal engineer, the pharmacy clerk, the vehicle telemetry specialist, Dr. Ferrer describing the injuries without exaggeration. Owen Prater testified next, playing his original footage. The courtroom heard Malik cry. Bellamy looked down at the defense table. Hale asked whether the online attention had made Owen famous. No, I just recorded what was in front of me. Dolores Kim testified that her nursing background hadn't caused her to interfere. Her eyes had. My training caused me to recognize a child in pain. My eyes caused me to see he had the walk signal. Agent Rourke walked the jury through the digital evidence chain. Devin Okafor explained the copied report language, though the judge limited how much statistical data the jury could hear. On the fourth day, Malik took the stand. Renee sat motionless in the front row. He told me to show my hands, Malik said. I thought he could already see them. I held up the bag so he'd know it was medicine. What happened next? He told me to turn around. I asked why. Then he grabbed me. How did it feel? At first I thought my wrist was going to break. Then the car burned my shoulder. I tried to lift my face off the window, but he pushed harder and said I was resisting. Were you trying to get away? No, I didn't know how to do what he wanted because I couldn't move. Why did you tell him your mother would know? Because she knows the law, but mostly because she's my mom. When something bad happens, you're supposed to tell your mom. Several jurors glanced at Renee. She kept her eyes on the leak. On cross, Hale's voice stayed gentle. You were frightened that day, weren't you? Yes. Fear can make things seem more forceful than they were. Maybe you pulled your arm when he took your wrist. My arm moved because he pulled it. You turned your head away from the vehicle. The window was hot. So you did move while he was trying to control you. Malik looked at the judge, then back. I moved my face so it wouldn't burn. I wasn't fighting him. Hale displayed a still frame with Malik's hand near the torn bag. An officer seeing this for the first time wouldn't know what was inside, would he? He could have asked. That wasn't my question. No, he didn't know, because he didn't ask. Part 12, the verdict. Bellamy testified in his own defense, the most dangerous choice of the trial. He said he'd feared Malik would step back into traffic. He said the bag could have held a weapon. He called Malik's questions escalating non-compliance. Warwick approached with the report. You wrote his hands were concealed. Where, in your own body camera footage, are they concealed? Bellamy hesitated. Warwick played the audio. You're hurting my arm. You told dispatch no medical assistance was needed. Did you hear that statement? There was a crowd yelling. Warwick played the personal phone video. He'll be fine. That means you knew there was something he might need to recover from, doesn't it? Figure of speech. Finally, Warwick displayed the timestamp Bellamy watched Owen's clip, beside the timestamp of his submitted report. You saw his visible hands. You heard him complain of pain. You watched the video. And then you wrote that neither thing happened. I wrote what I remembered from the encounter, not what the camera remembered. The sentence settled over the jury and stayed there. The jury deliberated 9 hours across 2 days. On the second afternoon, a court officer entered the waiting room. We have a verdict. Guilty on all 3 counts. Bellamy's shoulders dropped as though an invisible weight had finally landed. The judge revoked his release pending sentencing. Malik looked away. He didn't want the image of handcuffs to become the part that made him feel better. Outside, Renee gave one answer to the crowd of reporters. Today, a jury held one man accountable. Tomorrow, the work of making accountability ordinary continues. Part 13. What was recorded? 3 months later, at sentencing, Malik read a statement he'd written himself. You said I needed to learn how to behave. After that day, I was scared of sirens and crosswalks and people who were supposed to help me. I thought I'd caused it because I asked why.
I know now asking why wasn't a crime. Walking home wasn't a crime. Being afraid when you were hurting me wasn't resisting.
I don't want you punished because my mom has an important job. I want the next kid's mom to matter, even if nobody knows her name. Bellamy apologized, but continued to call the encounter a mistake made under pressure. The judge said an apology without full recognition carried limited weight and sentenced him to 51 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release with a permanent bar from law enforcement employment. State charges resolved through a concurrent sentence and permanent surrender of his certification. Chalmers lost his rank and certification and was separately charged with obstruction, eventually pleading guilty to a state records offense. The city's review reopened 10 prior complaints, adopted new discipline procedures, and appointed a permanent independent monitor. Millbrook Heights began publishing stop data by officer and race, barred confidentiality clauses from concealing public safety concerns, and created a hotline for families to request immediate preservation of body camera and dispatch evidence. 1 year later, Malik returned to Laurel and Ninth. Renee walked beside him. Dolores waited outside the coffee shop. Owen leaned on his bike. Xavier Combs stood with his mother near the curb. The city had repainted the crosswalk and installed a pedestrian head start. Malik pressed the button. The white figure appeared. For a moment he couldn't move, the sun off a parked car, his shoulder remembering heat. "We can turn back," Renee said. He shook his head and stepped into the crosswalk. Nobody cheered until he reached the other side. Then Dolores clapped, Owen rang his bike bell, and Malik laughed so suddenly the tears came with it. The moment didn't erase what had happened. It gave the intersection a second memory. "Do you think he understood at the end?" Malik asked later on the courthouse steps. "I don't know," Renee said. "Courts can require consequences. They can't force understanding." Then what was all of this for? So the truth got recorded, so he couldn't use his power without answering for it. So the people who protected him had to change what they were doing, and so you'd know none of it was your fault. I knew that part already. You know it now, Renee said. That's different. The end.